Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. I've been getting asked about 6-7 a lot lately. Family, friends, fans, and that's just the Fs. And while it has a well-deserved reputation for being meaningless brain rot, there's actually a lot more to it. Here's a representative email, but by no means the only one, from David Bush. I hope I'm saying your name right. I was just wondering what you thought of the brain rot amongst middle school kids and younger. I have this theory that the 6-7 meme is different from previous slang. It doesn't actually mean anything, at least not in the way that previous slang like hip means fashionable or dude means my friend. 6-7 has no meaning except to mark the speaker as someone who knows the joke. I guess my question is there anything else like that, and what would linguists call that? So today I'm doing a deep dive on 6-7. Along the way, we're going to see that it's not as different as it may seem, that there's a specific term for something that marks the speaker as someone who knows, and we're even going to get into what it probably meant at its origin, what it means now, and what we call that process. Key concepts we'll discuss along the way are the recency illusion, shibboleth, semantic bleaching, speech communities, criminal cant, communities of practice, and diffusion along social networks. And if you weren't keeping track of how many topics that is, it's 6-7. I'm Dr. Taylor Jones, and this is Language Jones. I want to thank Lingoda for sponsoring today's video. Lingoda is an online language school, not an app. They offer 5 languages: English, French, German, Spanish, and Italian. I adore Lingoda, and after trying it for Spanish and doing sprints in French and Italian, I can wholeheartedly endorse them. The sprint is Lingoda's most popular challenge, and for good reason. It motivates learners to commit to 60-minute online lessons, basically daily, and rewards you when you follow through. And that's actually their current promotion. A sprint is 30 lessons in 60 days with 50% cash back or 30 credits upon successful completion, and a super sprint is 60 lessons in 60 days with 50% cash back or 60 more credits on completion. And in the US, UK, and Hong Kong, it's actually 100% cash back. Classes run 24/7 and are a small group with a maximum of 5 students, and they're led by real certified teachers who are native level speakers. I loved the classes I've taken with Lingoda, and I'm looking forward to my next sprint. Who knows, maybe I'll see you there. Regardless, if you want to level up your language with personalized attention from actual human teachers, you can't beat Lingoda. Click my link in the description to get started and use my code LANGUAGE100 to get 20 euros off. Now, back to the video. Okay, so 6-7 is everywhere. It's all over TikTok, Instagram, all the socials, and if that weren't enough, it's topping the list of what kids in middle school are saying. I have friends in Canada telling me this stuff is just as common in Ottawa. Although, they sent me a clip talking about John because they know I'm one of the go-to experts on that word. Philadelphia's most important gift to the world after, the Declaration of Independence, the public library, bifocals, the lightning rod, and that's just the Fs. If you haven't heard somebody repeating 6-7, you will. Now, David is right that for most of the kids saying it, they really don't have any idea of what it means. Take this article from SB Nation attempting to explain part of it to the adults. The weirdest part of this meme is that most kids can't even explain why they like saying 6-7 or what it actually means. My 8-year-old daughter had absolutely no idea other than to remark, "You're not allowed to say it," out of fear of embarrassment. When you Google it, theories abound, but the general broad strokes story seems to be that it originated in a song by Skrilla in 2024 that includes such gems as "A geek like the Custies too," and of course, 6-7, I just bipped right on the highway. I'm gonna have a lot more to say about this in a minute. So somebody edited clips of LaMelo Ball, who's 6 feet 7 inches tall and whose name is French for the Mellow Ball. And a kid gets caught reciting this on camera at a game, it goes viral, Mello picks it up, and it explodes on social media as a self-referential meme. Skibbity Ohio on steroids. Now, first things first, other generations have their own meaningless brain rot or earworms or whatever death and decomposition-based metaphor you prefer for something not considered sufficiently intelligent. Leave me a comment if you want a deep dive on the cognitive role of linguistic metaphors and Lakoff's metaphors we live by. When I was in middle school, kids were saying "Heyo" all the time, and not nary a one of them had ever seen Johnny Carson. This brings me to a concept that Hiram Smith refers to a lot, especially in his soon-to-be-released magnificent treatment of the history of the N-word. That concept is the recency illusion. It wreaks havoc in the social sciences. The idea is that once we notice something, we have an unconscious bias. Am I allowed to say that anymore? We have an implicit cognitive process that makes us predisposed to think that what we just noticed is actually new. And often the thing we just noticed has been happening under the radar for decades or even centuries. So let's concede that for most of the people participating in the whole 6-7 thing, it doesn't have a meaning in the sense of communicating a specific referent or sense. It's not conveying information in the same way that a word like contrarianism or a phrase like the 86 Mets would. Instead, it's serving a social function, a lot like the use of totes-style truncations. It's marking the speaker as part of an in-group, that's the technical term, and inviting listeners to sort of co-construct community by going along with it. Hype up the 6-7er and your bootstrapping community. The technical term for this is a shibboleth. But here's the thing. In 2024, Skrilla meant something by that. You can't just say random shit and expect people to go with it when you made it up. You can't just make fetch happen.
Stop trying to make fetch happen.
It wouldn't be streets ahead.
Stop trying to coin the phrase streets ahead.
You can do it if you trick a credulous reporter into thinking you're teaching them slang people are actually using, like harsh realm, but that's a separate thing. And then, even when the hoax is exposed, people might use harsh realm ironically as a reference to the thing that then invites other people to co-construct that community through in-group knowledge of the hoax. But I digress. So the thing underlying all of this is basically a pattern I keep talking about. It's a pattern that's part of the book that I'm writing. Don't worry, I'm still writing it. I've just had a few other projects that take precedence. And part of it is the invisibility of Black English in the American mainstream. So a lot of people don't understand what Skrilla is saying in the song Doot Doot. And for some reason, what happens when people don't understand what a Black American is saying is that they just make shit up for it to mean. They go by context clues, but they don't usually have all the context. I've seen this over and over and over again, everywhere from the propagation of new slang like "Bye Felicia" to criminal prosecutors just making things up. So Skrilla starts with "Shades on, I'm Bull with the glasses," and if you don't know what that means, I would argue you don't have the entry-level knowledge of Philadelphia and Philadelphia slang to be able to pretend to interpret anything else. Now, lots of this is not strictly Black English and is in fact what is often called criminal cant. It's jargon. It's slang that comes from intentionally obscuring criminal activity. But that slang is slang spoken in an informal register of Black English. So we're going to do an inside read of the immediate context of 6-7 and then talk about how it spread and came to mean something else. So Skrilla continues, so many dead ops, so many ashes. Now, you all probably know or could recover from context that op is a truncation of opposition, as in the opposition, and it's a common term for rival gang members. However, through the process I'll explain shortly, it has come to be used by far more people who aren't in gangs than people who are, and it just means enemies or adversaries. But Skrilla goes on. True to stay strapped, I don't need mine. Bro put the belt right to they behind. The way that switch, brr, I know he dying. 6-7, I just bipped right on the highway. Let's break this down. The first line starts with a common poetic device across varieties of English where you can elide the beginning of a sentence. So it's the shooter, or less probably my shooter. The determiner doesn't really matter, but what matters is that it is a definite noun. It's referring to a presumably known shooter, where the shooter is an occupation, a triggerman. Stay is a Black English modal, the descendant of the verb to stay, and it indicates habituality. Strap means to be armed. Think of your sword strapped to your side, or I don't know, Danny Glover in Predator 2, he's strapped. Or Sammy Davis Jr. in Robin and the Seven Hoods. Now, the poetics of this are interesting because he continues, I don't need mine. My what? Well, it's what Sammy Davis might call his rod.
I always feel high when a rod is nearby, 'cause I like the fun of reaching for a gun and going bang, bang.
But it's never explicitly mentioned. Imagine Benvolio saying, Mercutio keeps his loins girded, I haven't the need. Bro put the belt right to the behind. Bro is a pronoun here referring to the antecedent shooter. It's he, third person masculine. The belt is another synecdoche? Synecdoche? I don't speak Greek. For a firearm, in this case suggesting an extended clip. The way that switch is a rod, the way that switch, brr, I know he's dying, that's an onomatopoeia. And you guys should see how I spelled this in my script because I really don't speak Greek. And finally, with all this context, including a broader context talking about driving and about being found later in his driveway and denying involvement, he says, 6-7, I just bipped right on the highway. Now, 1067 is a police radio call for a dead body. And later on, he goes on to say things like, send my shooter on a hit, I'll middleman a whole body. But if you don't know this, and you're not really tracking the rest of the lyrics, It could be that 6-7, I just bipped right on the highway is one of the clearest lines in the whole song. And if you just credulously believe that Google will have an accurate result for slang people use in other cities and don't, put on websites that rank well, then you might even think that you can just Google 67 or 6-7 and bip and get a meaningful answer. And when you do, you'll get all sorts of nonsense. Bip is everything from Blood and Peace to a smash and grab in Oakland to a haircut in Baltimore. So SB Nation reports that 6-7 is largely accepted to be a reference to 67th Street in Chicago, which has a reputation inside the city for being dangerous. This is a weak, contorted explanation that misses that Skrilla isn't from Chicago. I mean, hell, the music video for Doot Doot's in Philly after the big Eagles win. But people, in this case James Dator, can just say stuff. And it gets taken as a credible explanation because it's in print. There's a lot of these explanations, including that bipping is swerving and that LaMelo swerves around his ops on the basketball court. So, retconning the whole thing, you get people who think it's just a random line about LaMelo being 6'7" and swerving on the court, and that line got inserted into Doot Doot like some sort of late Aramaic insertion into the Deuteronomistic text. Say that 5 times fast. Does that sound like a crazy metaphor? Well, remember the name for a social in-group marker? It's a shibboleth. After the passage in Judges 12, where the Gileadites demanded people say shibboleth to determine if they were actually Ephraimites who notoriously couldn't pronounce Tibboleth. Tibboleth? So this kind of thing, using languages to mark in-group membership, is attested at least 3,000 years ago, but almost certainly goes back as far as language does, and probably goes back as far as meaningful gesture does. But I digress. So you've got a Philadelphia rapper using Philadelphia slang and Philadelphia police codes in his music video shot during Philadelphia's celebration of Philadelphia's victory in the Super Bowl, and somehow people say, he's black, this must be about Chicago. And as soon as the line is repurposed because somebody made a clever connection between a lyric and a different referent, it spread like wildfire, divorced from its original context. Leave me a comment if you want to see a discussion between me and another expert on how Black English makes creative use of context to identify reference. That could be a fun one. Anyway, from there, it started to become what linguists call semantically bleached. Side note, I once had a reviewer write an impassioned paragraph about not continuing to use the term semantic bleaching on the grounds that in the case of a specific term that started as a slur and underwent some form of amelioration that's getting better, it was inappropriate to use a term etymologically related to whiteness to discuss getting better. Of course, the etymology of bleach actually means black if you go back far enough, but black means pale if you go back further, so all of it superseded by the fact it might not be amelioration at all, but rather the recency illusion. But I digress. So you have a speech community, Philadelphia Black English. You also have a community of practice, either rappers, if you mistake the character and the poetry for an admission by the author, or drug dealers, shooters, and gang members. And because of the tremendous diffuse nature of social networks, especially on social media, and the fact that you can remix things, you get a phrase detached from the context, given a new context, and then popularized. And eventually that context becomes bleached even further until it becomes an earworm, since you've heard it so many times, but semantically it's almost void. Socially, however, it carries a communicative function of being a shibboleth for what my generation called the terminally online, and what the kids these days are calling brain rot. I'm really thinking the death and decomposition metaphors are worth pursuing here. And all of that feels particularly noticeable to those of us who aren't in the rapidly spreading 6-7 set, and who, because we're not middle schoolers, don't need the validation of feeling like we're on the inside of that in-group. So it becomes a scribboleth. By the way, this also seems like it's kind of easier to solve than a lot of people are making it. Skrilla, if you're watching this, hey, somebody send this to Skrilla. Skrilla, I know that the art is separate from the artist and that rap lyrics are artistic expression and not admission of anything. I've testified to that in court. So can you just let us know, since this is getting so big, what did you mean by 6-7 when you say 6-7, I just bipped right on the highway? Was it catching a body? Is it something else? Has anybody even bothered to ask you this yet? Also, if you like what I'm doing with the channel, like and subscribe. I'm not talking specifically to Skrilla, but I'm also not either. So today we looked at TikTok brain rot, but it allowed us a window into speech communities and communities of practice, slang and regional language variation, diffuse linguistic networks, semantic bleaching, shibboleths, and the recency illusion. For an educational linguistics YouTube channel that started as a blog, let me know what score you'd give that on a scale from 1 to 10. 6, 7? By the way, if you're new to the channel, I'm Dr. Taylor Jones. I've got a PhD in linguistics from the University of Pennsylvania. And here on the channel, I discuss everything related to language, linguistics, language learning, and culture. If you're into those topics, be sure to subscribe and ring the bell for notifications. That means you too, Skrilla. If you like what I'm doing with the channel, you can always support it on YouTube with super thanks or over on Patreon at patreon.com/languagejones. Please leave a comment. They are great for the algorithm. And subscribe if you haven't already. If you like this content, you're probably going to like this one. Until next time, happy learning.